The story behind Domenic Troiano's hit, We All Need Love. We could sure use that song a lot more these days. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Canada. Keep in mind, if you want to hear the entire interview, there'll be links in the description of this video. Also, this whole interview is based on a book. Domenic Troiano, His Life and Music. We All Need Love. How did that come about?
It was during the recording of the third Capitol album, Fret Fever. Towards the end, or during basically Capitol was giving my brother pressure to come up with a hit single. Subtly, I mean, they had already done three. That was the third album, so he was getting some pressure from Rupert Perry and Los Angeles and whatever. We need, in other words, let's try and justify you staying on the label, So he kind of was racking his brains. I was in the studio. That's when we were all in the studio, watching and, during the recording process. And he came up with a song. And really, it was a biographical song because he realized that he had done some mistakes. He had made some mistakes in his life I wouldn't say not so much by a mistake, by ignoring, by letting things slide, more important things slide, like personal stuff, and not being there because he was so consumed by the music and by his creativity and by his he was just so focused on that he let other important things slide. So he realized that he had become too egotistical.
If you want to think about We All Need Love, We All Need Love was the exception to the rule. Domenic Troiano has repeatedly been referred to as the musician's musician. Musicians don't have hit singles. Their fans are all other musicians, so they don't get they get the level of respect as musicians, but they don't get the same level of popularity. But and typically they're not interested in it. But We All Need Love. It was a great song, a fabulous vocal with Roy Kenner that helped carry the song, well written, and it was a huge record for the group W in Europe a few years later. But We All Need Love was a hit single, the exception to the rule of the musician's musician.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. The Mandela kept coming up. I know you guys spent a lot of time on that group. That's just, to me, sounded like one of those bands that just could have been, that's just, if enough people would have heard. I mean, they were playing in LA and without a big hit.
That's right. They didn't even have a record on the radio. And the Mandela, I think a lot of the success has to be attributed to the promotion that they got from Randy Martin, otherwise known as Raphael Markovitz. And he worked in television in Canada and he understood that it was more important for the band to get publicity than anything else. Mm-hmm. So he would organize stunts and events. Frank has told the story of, it's in the book, of Randy showing up at their home. He'd been down to New York City and he brought home a strobe light. And the Mandela was the first band to use a strobe light. And they would dress up in these matching suits. The visual impact of the dance moves, the theatrics, and the music was kind of in the background. The music was always great. The music was always phenomenal. But the show was it. And so when they went to Los Angeles, and they were down there for about a month in the fall of 1966. Word spread like wildfire. They'd go to the Whiskey A Go-Go, they'd go to the Cheetah, they'd go to the Hullabaloo, and they would be lined up out on the street for people trying to get in. And some pretty big names apparently didn't get into the
Paul
shows.
McCartney.
Yes, Paul McCartney, the Beach Boys, all these, they're great stories if they're true. But
Nancy Sinatra.
yeah, but the fact is they didn't even have a record recorded yet. They didn't have a record on the radio, and they were packing these places out because of the fantastic show that they were doing.
Sound like a guy who liked to close files, but the last thing he wanted not to happen is have a file open someplace. There's that thing, having an autistic daughter. It's all about closing files. Okay, I'm going to draw this. I have to finish it no matter what. That's taught me an awful lot about the most real expertise in music. A lot of these people, even though if some of them are hoarders and they have a lot of problems, but there's one thing the best always do is they're really good at closing files. And then they want to reopen another one, but
I'll tell you a story on that. Back in when I first got to know Donnie, I had some Guess Who bootlegs of him playing with the band that he'd never heard before, and so I packaged them up and I sent them to him in the mail. They had them all burned on CD and everything. And about 3 months later, I said, "Have you listened to those CDs yet?" "Oh no, Mark, I haven't got around to it yet. I haven't got around. But thanks for sending them. I really appreciate it." 3 months later, after that, I said to him, "Donnie, have you listened to any of the music?" He said, "Mark, quite honestly, I appreciate you sending them to me, but I am more focused on what I'm working on now than what I did back in those days. That's all there is to it." And he was looking forward. He cared about his musical legacy. Getting the Mandela and Bush and the Guess Who and the James Gang reissued on CD. He had a central role in how that was done because he cared about that. But for him, it was all about moving forward and looking at tomorrow rather than yesterday.
But We All Need Love became my brother's theme song, and he really tried to live that style in the years after. And he really became very well. He was always a great guy, but he became more so. But what I wanted to say was, my brother included me in the early years, in my early teenage years. He included me in all his activities. He encouraged me. He took me to see Jerry and the Pacemakers. I was 12 years old. He took me to see the Rolling Stones. At least he was opening for these bands. The Rolling Stones. Imagine in '66 seeing the Rolling Stones. Just as Satisfaction was becoming a #1 hit at the Maple Leaf Gardens. He took me to see the Animals and Herman's Hermits at the baseball stadium, the Toronto Maple Leaf baseball stadium. He took me to see Santana, meeting Santana, like all these activities. He wanted to include me. He flew me down to see the James Gang in New York when they played at Carnegie Hall. So what I'm trying to say is he included me. He spent lots of money doing that. And then when I looked at all the other musicians in all these different settings, not one of them brought their brother or sister to any of those things. So that takes a special person to do that, because to be honest, I was a bit of a brat, a bit of a young punk. And I said the wrong thing, I'm sure repeatedly, when I was in these people's company. And he probably had to whack me a few times, and then he told me to get off the stage after the Rolling Stones had finished performing. I was on the stage waving at everybody. I had become an egotistical whatever. And and anyhow, he called me and said, "Frank, get off the stage." And then I picked up his guitar. We went to the car. But anyhow, he was a great brother and I love him dearly. And there was so many wonderful memories. Mark?
I would like to think that we have written the book that Donnie would have wanted written about him. Of course, he wasn't here for us to write with, but we had lots of fantastic interviews. And for me, the sounding board has always been Frank and Gina, Sean, Rita, the Troiano family, if you will, and the extended family of people like Roy Kenner, who sang with him and performed with him for decades. They were like brothers. And as you can see, he was quoted throughout the book, and their validation means so much to me. This has been a humbling experience. This has been a rich experience because I've recognized that so many of the people who interacted with Domenic had the same experience that I did. He cared about you. He was interested in your well-being, and he was always interested in paying it forward. He was certainly rightfully proud and confident of his accomplishments, but it was never egotistical. It was always with a degree of humility and gratitude. He was an exceptional human being. And so for me, this has been nothing short of an honor to write this book.
Well said, well stated, Mark.
The brand new book is by Mark Doble and Domenic Troiano's brother, Frank. Mark was actually a good friend of Dominic's. There'll be links in the description if you want to pick up the book. If you want to see the entire interview, there'll be links in the description as well. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Canada. Take care of yourself.